Hello, everybody. This is Jeff with LAD, and Gene Mandernack is on as well. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes as people are joining, as we've just started the webinar. So maybe about 30 seconds to a minute, we'll get started. And in the meantime, Gene and I were just having a quick chat about some of the ethical concerns about what happens with this fast-changing AI technology on campus when it's not even some people physically who are attending some meetings, but they're AI agents and interesting stuff, Gene.
Yeah,
All
and it's only going
right.
to keep evolving.
Absolutely. Well, that's what we've discovered over this series is that the technology is changing so fast. We started this in March, and even since then, there's been things in the news and, both positive and challenging. So it's an
Right.
exciting time.
Agreed. We actually just looked at our participant list to see if we had any AI assistants joined, but we do not have any AI
Not
assistants
as far as we know.
as far as we know. Yeah.
Just going to open up the chat so that everybody can put any comments or questions into the chat. Okay. And so we are now a couple minutes past the hour. So, in the sake of keeping things moving, because we're on now until 1:45 and then questions and answers afterwards, I'll just get started. So, welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us for this, our sixth presentation on AI for higher ed. Today's topic, as it shows there on the screen, is leading institutional change, building an AI-ready campus culture. And I wanted to say thanks to those who have attended throughout the series and watched on demand to learn more about AI. Thanks for letting us sort of help you navigate this unknown world, and Gene is helping us make it more known. So Gene Mandernack from Grand Canyon University is our subject matter expert on AI and technology in education, and LAD Digital is using AI in course material building, and that's where we are interested in helping people understand how AI is changing on campus. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Gene, and we'll get into leading institutional change. Thanks, Gene.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And thanks everyone for joining today. As Jeff said, this is the end of a six-part series. And we've talked about faculty and we've talked about students and we've talked about student services. And this last and final webinar really kind of brings it all together when we start talking about what does this mean for us as a campus? And as a campus, how do we bring all of these different parts together so that we can approach this rapidly changing AI atmosphere in a meaningful way? Because the one thing that AI has taught us over the last 3 years is that it is moving quickly. And the minute we think that we've caught up or that we might be kind of understanding what we need to do, the technology advances again. And so when we think about typical higher education, we are not known for moving quickly. In fact, higher education has a reputation for really moving at a snail's pace, for wanting to weigh every pro and con and make a committee and think about it. But AI did not wait for us to follow our typical processes. And when we look at all of the available research on AI right now in higher education, it tells us adoption is happening. It's happening with students, it's happening with faculty, it's happening with staff, it's happening in the technologies that we use. So it's really not about us saying, are we going to allow AI? Are we going to adopt AI? That ship has sailed. AI is happening everywhere. What the question has really shifted to is how are we going to approach this? Are we going to be able to come together in a unified, strategic, coherent way to really make AI use responsible and intentional in our institutions? Because AI is going to continue to evolve. And so it's not even about making rules or deciding on the tool. It's really about creating a strategy and a philosophy for what AI means for your campus and how, as a coordinated unit, you're going to agree on what that means. Because if we look at what's happening right now, we know that students are using AI widely. Depending on the research that you look at, students' self-disclosed AI use is anywhere between 83 and 97%. And that's self-disclosed use. We also know the students are really nervous about disclosing their AI use because they're unsure what the policies are. They're unsure if it's a violation of academic integrity. They don't want to get accused of cheating. And so if we can say that we have about 90% of students telling us they're using AI, I would be a lot more confident that it's closer to 100%. And that doesn't even count all of the students that are using AI as part of programs where it's embedded and they don't even realize that they're using AI. At the same time, faculty have very much started to experiment with what does AI mean for them. Not just in the how do we deal with students using AI, but more explicitly, how do they use AI to help them create their courses? How do they make feedback more effective? How do they simply become more efficient at all of the things that we ask faculty to do? Staff are also dabbling in this, not only for efficiency, but because most of the programs and different strategies and structures that staff are using are now becoming AI enabled, whether they like it or not. And so AI is now woven into virtually every online application we use. It's in Microsoft products, it's in our Grammarly, it's in our internet browsers, it's in virtually everything that we touch. So even when staff are not intentionally going out to ChatGPT or Gemini, they're utilizing AI in all the programs and processes that they're already using as part of their job. Everywhere we look, AI is being integrated. So it's not a matter of, are we going to adopt AI? It's how do we take this really decentralized, disparate AI adoption that is already happening, and how do we respond and start to bring it together into a much more coordinated and intentional approach? And so as you think about your own institution, I want you to just take a moment, and you can answer this in the chat. And in the chat, you can just put 1, 2, 3, or 4. With 1, right now, AI at your institution is really just individuals kind of using it in ways that they are experimenting with and finding valuable. 2, you're starting to get some emerging support and guidance, but it still doesn't seem very coordinated or cohesive. 3, that you feel like you do have a coordinated strategy happening. Or 4, you really feel like you have it embedded in a systematic way across your university processes. Go ahead and answer in the chat with where you would describe AI adoption at your institution. I'm going to change my chat to everyone so I can see it. So if your chat's not already at everyone, you can click at that arrow at the top of your chat and change it to everyone. And go ahead and just indicate 1, 2, 3, or 4 on AI adoption at your institution. As you think about what this means for you, I'll kind of reflect on our journey at Grand Canyon University. And you're going to hear me refer to a lot of our experiences. We were very much where you were. And right now in the chat, we've got a 1 and a 2. It started out with just like everybody was using it. And it almost felt like as an institution, we were just in a holding pattern, like, let's wait and see what happens. In fact, I can remember some of our institutional leadership saying, I don't want to take action yet in case this is, just another fad and the AI kind of train runs through and moves on. They actually compared AI to MOOCs, and they said, we all got really excited about MOOCs, and then it ended up being kind of a blip and everybody lost interest. And so even our own institutional leadership said, let's wait and see. And then about a year into it, they said, this isn't a fad. It's not going away. In fact, it's becoming everywhere. And so they said, let's start taking a look at what that means. And the very first thing we did, and I don't know that I would recommend this, was we wrote a policy because we didn't feel like we had anywhere to start without a policy. And then what happened was we realized a policy without a strategic plan, without a philosophy, without a guiding vision was a very ineffective way to deal with rapidly moving AI and technology adoption. And so we started going backwards and really asking ourselves, what does it mean when you're starting to, as an institution, address a problem that is already prolific on your campus? If we look at the research, really faculty and staff and students say about 94% of them are using AI, and only about half, about 54%, have any idea what their institution guidelines say about it. And so for most of us, our institutions probably are somewhere in that 1, 2, maybe a 2.5, where they maybe have rolled out a policy, but they aren't necessarily strategic. They aren't thinking about how they're getting that policy out to people. They aren't thinking about what stakeholders need to be involved, the implications of the policy, the alignment of policy to their institutional mission and vision. And because of that, they aren't really addressing that bigger issue of how do we become an AI ready institution? Because this institutional readiness gap is occurring when we have individuals adopting AI tools. They're using tools, they're trying different tools, they're using their own personal judgment on whether it's right, whether it's wrong. So it really ends up being a lot of isolated experimentation. And when the institution starts thinking about how do I move from this individual adoption to truly an institutional readiness approach, we have to take a step back and we have to ask ourselves, what are some of our shared expectations? What are some of the goals we have as an institution? And really, before we ever even evaluate to figure out what tools are we approved to use, why are we using those tools? What is our intentional kind of capacity building? What are we trying to solve? Because without our institution taking a position, what ends up happening is we end up with lots of one-off policies, one-off support, and we never come together with a cohesive strategy that allows us to adapt and evolve as the technology evolves. And knowing how quickly AI is changing, that cohesive strategy becomes essential. Because an AI-ready institution is not an AI adopting institution. An AI institution is really about thinking about how does the use of AI align with our values? What does responsible use look like in our specific environment with our mission, our vision, our student population? And are we providing a cohesive support structure that includes decision makers, includes policy, includes professional development, includes financial support, so that as AI evolves, we can continue to adapt all of our policies and procedures to adapt with it. So readiness is not about saying how many people at your institution are using AI, or sending out the press releases about AI ready classrooms, or that you've adopted AI into your curriculum. It's really about being cautious and being intentional. I always say it's informed agency. It's knowing when you're using AI in a meaningful way that helps you meet your goals, but also avoiding AI when it's not. So it's not just enthusiasm, it's not just adoption and excitement, but it's really about having a strategy. And so when you think about your institution, a lot of you will go, well, we're not there yet. Our institution hasn't thought strategically. And it's often that they're not thinking strategically because the way they've gone about AI use. What I've seen most often when I'm working with different institutions is they took a tool first approach. They immediately said, oh my gosh, AI is here. We need to figure out what AI tool we can support. And they really started with the technology. And so before they ever thought about the purpose or the why they were getting AI, they started evaluating for security, for capacity, for cost, and they adopted AI without ever asking, what problem are we solving with AI? And what happens when you do a tool first approach is you're constantly chasing the next tool, because the tools evolve, free platforms end up with paid subscriptions, one tool buys out another tool. And if you have a tool first strategy, you're never going to catch up. You're always chasing the next evolution of the technology. Now, other campuses, and this is actually where GCU made its error, they take a policy only response. We looked at it and we kind of panicked. We said, oh my gosh, students are using it, faculty are using it, staff are using it, and we don't have any rules. And so we made rules. We started with a policy, and our first policy was like 27 pages. of rules. This isn't a good strategy either, because now as AI changes, as people find new ways to use AI, you're just constantly adding amendments to the rules, and you're having new rules, and you're having lists of rules. And you can never, again, keep up with the evolving technology because the rules change as the technology changes. And so rather than starting with policy, you really need to think about, well, what do we expect? What does it look like if we were adopting this technology, using it to solve problems in our environment, and being true to our mission as an institution? And so we got there. We just started with policies, realized that we were never going to stay on top of it with policies, and had to go back and really think about what it meant to be an AI ready institution. Another problem is we often start adopting technologies without thinking about whether or not we have the infrastructure to do that. One of the universities that I work with, their provost came out early and said, we want to be a leader in AI. And I encourage all of you, try things, get out there. You have the green light to experiment in your classroom, see what it looks like. Unfortunately, what that created was an IT nightmare, with people using all sorts of technologies with no guidelines on what was proprietary and what's not proprietary, and what does it mean if you're putting institutional information out into these AI tools without rules around it, and what did this mean for FERPA? And it started to create this whole mess of how do we rein that back in when we didn't have enough support and guidance to be encouraging that kind of exploration. And then one of the other areas that institutions often start that becomes really challenging is they start to just try to have a one-shot fits all. And I think this is the response when you start to feel overwhelmed, when you recognize different departments, different programs, different faculty, staff, students, everybody's using different tools, they're following different guidelines. And a natural response to that is, let's rein everybody in and tell them that we need to all be on the same page using one approach. And while a centralized approach is good, you have to make sure it's one that recognizes all the different context and expectations, because otherwise we start to limit AI use with no real strategic vision. If you really want to change the culture around AI, it's about coordination and thinking about all of the different players and stakeholders and contexts and needs. And then how does that all align so that we can have a centralized support structure that's also flexible enough to recognize all of those individual differences? So if you really want to see coordinated campus change, your institution must commit to three things. First one is awareness of your culture. I can't tell you here today what your AI institutional kind of baseline or spine should look like, because it's going to vary for every single institution. As an example, Grand Canyon University is a Christian university, and part of our institutional mission is a Christian mission. So for us, it wasn't just about AI adoption. It was also thinking about, what does AI adoption mean within that particular context? Now, within that, we also are fully aware that we have colleges of natural sciences, nursing programs, engineering programs, and that the different specific technologies are going to look different. So what we had to really do is sit down with our faculty, with our students, with our deans, with the various representatives, and ask, what are our shared values? What does it mean to use AI technology responsibly while staying aligned with our Christian mission? And that commitment to the culture over the tools was actually several weeks of conversations as we really went back and forth to and agreed upon, what does the technology of AI mean within that Christian culture? Now, your institution is going to have its own specific context. Some are going to be serving primarily first-generation students. That might look different than other universities that are professional programs. So you really need to think about, what is our culture? And have those conversations about the intersection of culture and tools. The next one is alignment. It's not about how quickly you can adopt AI. It's how well can we identify the various parts of our institution that are going to be stakeholders, so that as we adopt these technologies, we can be sure we're adopting them in a way that's strategic and sustainable over time. And then the last one, no matter how good AI gets, and it's getting really good, it's always people over platforms. Not just what can be done with AI, but an equally important question is what needs to remain human? And those conversations have been some of the most meaningful conversations in thinking about things like, for example, AI can really effectively grade. It can look at a student's transcripts and it can give them advising advice about what classes they should take. It can look at their study patterns and it can give them very detailed study kind of guides. But because of our culture and our mission, we decided it was really important to us that students had support systems in people. And so even if their advisors and their counselors are using AI to make sure they have the best program ready, they're not just giving students the AI tool and letting students do it. They're talking to a person because we made intentional decisions where people over platforms was important because of our mission and vision. And once again, I'm not going to tell you which pieces of your mission and vision are going to require people over platforms, but those are conversations you need to have where you make intentional decisions where even if you could offload to AI, you're not going to because you want humans involved in either that interaction, that decision, or that process. So those three commitments are going to be your baseline starting points. And then from there, everything comes down to support, alignment, and sustainment. How do we make sure that as we are coming together as an institution, we're making responsible action possible? Oftentimes when we look at irresponsible or risky AI use, it's not because people didn't care, it's because they had inadequate support. And when we look at that kind of decentralized system, it's because we didn't have a strong spine aligning it all together. And so that's what we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about. How do you effectively support, align, and sustain AI adoption so that you can be a coordinated, cohesive campus? The first thing is you have to think about what it means to make responsible support possible. Because it's not simply a policy, that's like a necessary but insufficient. It's not just faculty development. It's not just financial support. It's not just tools and processes. It's all of it. You need to think about all of the different places and all of the different stakeholders that are going to weigh in. Because you do need to think about what is our AI governance structure? Who has the ultimate authority? At some institutions, it's going to come up through the academic lines. At other institutions, it might come up through IT security. But your institution needs to think about who is making those decisions. It might be that you have multiple pillars that all weigh in with a provost or another chief academic officer making the decision with designated and intentional weigh-in from each of those stakeholder pillars. Likewise, who's then communicating and giving that guidance? Who's responsible for allocating the necessary resources, not only to the purchasing of the technology, but to supporting the training, the experimentation, whatever other materials might be involved? And how is that process influenced by changing technology? We can't just make these decisions once. These decisions are going to happen again and again and again. And as the technology evolves and we make those decisions, we have to continue to do the professional development. And recognizing that this is a never-ending looping job, you also need to think about, are we giving people enough time and recognition to engage in that work? AI is evolving so quickly, it's not realistic to assume that everybody is just able to layer this on to their existing jobs without any additional support time or guidance. And so we really need to think about, at your institution, are the people that are making the decisions, do they have the adequate information to do that? And are the people that are involved in this, the faculty, the staff, the students, do they have enough support to implement properly? Because there are so many different stakeholders involved, it's really helpful to sit down at your institution and truly ask, for every AI decision that's made, who's involved? And I'll give you an example of one happening at our institution right now, and we are in the middle of it. But our IT department, our academic web services, actually created a grading support program that could be integrated into our learning management system. And this came from some institutional research that we did. And that institutional research told us that our online faculty were spending about 40% of their time on grading and feedback. Now, we know grading and feedback is important, but we also know time is limited and human contact is important. And so institutional research came back to student services and said, you know what, if we could get the time the faculty spend on grading down, we think we could increase the student to faculty contact time to help support our students more effectively. And student support services said, absolutely, our students, or especially our online students, would love more one-on-one interaction with faculty. So then our faculty training and development got involved and said, we can absolutely train them on strategies to interact with our students more. But the first thing we have to do is get down that grading time so we can free up and make available more time for that one-on-one interaction. So Academic Web Services came in and said, we can create an AI tool that will do that grading and feedback. At which point then, IT security came in and said, okay, we need to see what this means for FERPA. Then we had academic integrity coming in and saying, what do we do if we have grade appeals based on feedback that was coming from this? Then we had faculty testing it, telling us about tone, length of survey. Curriculum services then got involved because we said, you know what? If they're grading it, we need to change some of these rubrics because we're discovering AI follows the rubric a lot better than faculty do. And when AI is following that rubric so closely, we're discovering our rubrics are off. And so this one technology decision, should we have a grading support tool? It's actually not a grading support tool, it's a feedback support tool. Involved our academic leadership, it involved our faculty, it involved curriculum services, it involved our academic integrity. We literally had every stakeholder weighing in on how does this one feedback tool impact the student experience? And then we rolled it out and piloted it with students and we got more feedback. At which point we went back to Academic Web Services for changes. Then we went back to curriculum services, to faculty development, and it just ends up being a continuous loop of stakeholder involvement. But notice, none of these pieces could happen alone. What did faculty tell us? Yeah, we'd love help. What did students say? We want feedback. We want good feedback. We want targeted feedback, and we want it quickly. Academic Web Services said we can use AI. None of the pieces alone built an effective tool. And then we go back to some of those early principles I talked to you about. We also decided human decision-making was essential here. That while AI could help provide feedback, it wasn't going to bypass the human involvement in the feedback and the grading. And so even the development of the tool went back to our spine of human first for us in grading and feedback. And so it turned it into a more interactive process, despite the fact that our Academic Web Services team told us, yeah, we can automate the whole thing. We can have it look at the rubric, we can have it give feedback, we can have it grade. We don't need humans involved. Our principles, because of our strategy, our mission, and our people over process decisions, said that's an area that we will keep the human involved, even though technology could have done it. So for any given AI decision at your university, you're going to want to sit down and think about who are all the stakeholders and who do we need to bring into this decision-making process? Because every AI decision is going to be a shared process. And then within that, making decisions about who holds the power and who makes the decision in any given context. This is another one that we are still trying to figure out with our feedback tool. Because where Academic Web Services is like, well, we don't need the human involved here. Faculty are saying we want to be involved. And then we're having legal and the FERPA people weigh in saying, you know, what do we need for involvement? And ultimately, we decided for us, this would be our chief academic officer that would make the final decision on how that AI tool would be implemented. And then once they make that decision, they'll go back to faculty training, Academic Web Services, code of conduct, all of the different departments to then let them know how their decision impacts them. For every single AI decision, though, you want to think about like who does make the decision, what belongs to the faculty to decide, where do the questions go, who do they ask, and who is ultimately accountable for each of those decisions. And if somebody doesn't like the decision or the technology changes and we need to review the decisions, how do we escalate those concerns? Let me give you another example. And this is the one that Jeff and I started this webinar chit-chatting about, was just last week. We were doing a faculty training session on AI, and we noticed in our Zoom log, we had multiple participants that were logged in that said AI agent of, and then it had a faculty member's name. We had never experienced this before. So as soon as that webinar ended, we kind of looked it up and we're like, what is going on here? And we discovered that there are AI agents out there now that faculty can get a program and they can have their own personal agent. They can send that agent into Teams meetings or Zoom meetings with questions, with an agenda, and have that agent ask questions on their behalf, take notes, come back to them with themes, who said what, who did what. And our first question when we saw this was, wait, can they do that? What does this mean? And that question literally started us right down this decision-making path, because it became, first of all, a question of, is this an IT security issue? Is this a faculty development issue? Is this a rank term tenure issue? Like, does this count as committee service if you send in your AI avatar? We've never had this before. And so we literally started thinking about, is an AI avatar an IT security question? Is this a faculty training and development question? Is this a rank term tenure question? What are the rights with this? And so we started looking at the individual paths and figuring out who's accountable and how we escalated up on each one of those. And in case any of you are wondering, we're still trying to figure it out. What we have discovered is our legal team came back to us and said, on a meeting by meeting, case by case basis, this may be a legal issue because all the information for these AI agents is stored in a third-party software. And that third-party vendor or that third-party software may or may not have permission or access to our proprietary information. So even legal told us, we can't tell you that it's right or wrong, but we can tell you, depending on the context of the meeting, it may be wrong. And so then legal weighed in on that. Then we had rank term tenure come back and say, we need to talk about this. We didn't have a clear answer, because somebody might be really meaningfully engaging. If they send their questions to the agent, they're following up with it. They just weren't able to attend that meeting. They're actually engaging more than the person who just didn't attend the meeting. So we need to think about what this means. And so rank term tenure is still having conversations about the meaning of it. Likewise, faculty training and development are trying to decide, does it count to attend a training if your AI avatar attends the training and comes in with your questions and then takes the information back with you, but then you go ahead and complete whatever, deliverable was required at the end of that session? These are all unanswered questions that a month ago we didn't even know we needed to be asking, because none of us realized AI agents had this ability yet. So from an institutional AI readiness, it's not about that we had the answers. Is that we had the processes of where do the questions go, how do we escalate concerns, and who's ultimately responsible for this, and who's going to evaluate those tools. So at the same time, we actually have our IT security team looking at the specific AI agent tools that they were using, because it might end up being that it's a tool-specific security concern. We don't know. But an AI-ready institution will have the processes and the decision-making lines to escalate these issues as they evolve. And then having those safe pathways for experimentation. Notice in my example about the AI avatars attending meetings, I did not immediately say that we shut it down. What we did is we started asking, is this helpful or is this harmful? Does this violate our person over technology process? Are there opportunities that we could let people dabble in this and see what this means? And if there are, how do we make sure that we have safe pathways? The biggest challenges with experimenting around AI tend to be based in the IT security, that it's institutional information. We aren't really sure where it goes when you put it into AI, so we have to make sure it's protected. And so when you're thinking about creating these safe pathways, you really are going to want to bring IT security in and say, how do we do this? What are some of the technical considerations we need to keep in mind? And then equally important, Once we've told somebody they can do this, have we given them the time and capacity and resources to play with it, experiment, figure out if this is valuable, and then bring it back to the university? It's not helpful if we allow experimentation and then it never goes anywhere. Then we're back to pockets of people that are doing stuff without it informing the whole. So you need to have a structure that brings that full circle so that you know that supported experimentation can come back and inform the institutional policy. Because if we want to make it meaningful, we have to do more than simply say, go ahead and try it. We have to say, we realize that trying it and trying it well, so getting the right security permissions, being intentional, coming back to the university to share your results, that all takes time. And it takes more than just go ahead. It takes, what do you need? Do you need a course release? Do you need a release from a committee? How are you going to be able to experiment in a way that is truly meaningful so that you can take the time to reach out to all the necessary stakeholders? And then at your institution, just bringing those together, making sure that there's a process for experimentation, that IT security knows when somebody has been allowed to experiment, so maybe they have access to tools that are not available to everyone else, that faculty training and development is connected into this process so that when we have a good lesson learned over here, it comes back, and that that individual person is getting the time, recognition, and support they need to do this process well. Because we know that AI use is happening everywhere, but we want to make it intentional. And so it should not be fun AI for the sake of fun AI. There are so many fun AI programs out there right now. You can make videos, you can make podcasts, you can digitize yourself, you can have a personal avatar, you can have an avatar that's so realistic looking that students don't even know if it's you live or if it's your AI avatar. But for every single AI integration, we have to make sure we're starting with a purpose, not a technology. And so asking yourself, does this impact anything we care about? For us at Grand Canyon, we really went back and said, if we're going to bring AI in, we want to make sure that it hits one of these things. It either helps student learning, it expands access so that we can more effectively serve the people we serve, it allows us to connect in a more human and meaningful way, it preserves the integrity of the learning process, it somehow supports students better, or it releases some faculty and staff capacity. If it doesn't do one of these things, we go back and ask ourselves, what problem are we solving? And if we can't answer the question, what problem we're solving, it was probably not a good AI integration. Or there was a new problem that emerged and we need to have a conversation about, are there other issues that AI can help us address? But notice we keep going back to that, like, what problem is there? Because if you keep getting so involved with all the possibilities available with AI, you're just constantly chasing the technology, the new evolution, the new agent, the new capacity that it can do. But if you start with the problem, what are we trying to solve? Does this help learning? Does this help student support? Does this help capacity? Is this an efficiency? What is it doing? And then identify, if AI helped me do this well, how will I know? What does success look like in this capacity? And then, did AI help us get there? Because AI absolutely can solve many real, genuine institutional needs that we have struggled with for years. But we have to be intentional. We have to know that we're not simply adopting AI for the sake of AI, and that we're going through in a meaningful decision filter so that all AI integration is purposeful and intentional. So just for yourself, start with, what problem am I solving? What is my purpose? Then once you've identified that, ask yourself, does this align with my institutional mission, the institutional spine? And how are we keeping humans involved in the loop? What is important for us for humans? How do we maintain trust in that connection? So how are we being transparent? What do we show? What do we not show? Does it matter what we're talking about and showing and using? And then close the loop. How do we know if we were successful? And then we go back to that first purpose question. Did the integration of AI here help me address that issue? And if it helped me address that issue, am I still keeping humans central where humans need to be central? Because education, we know, decades, actually more than decades, hundreds of years of research and experience has told us learning is inherently a social task. When students truly learn, they learn through engagement, they learn through collaboration, they learn through talking, they learn through dialogue, through being inspired by a faculty member. It's inherently social. We also know over the last several decades, many decades, that our time has been more and more limited. AI actually helps us to address this problem we've been dealing with. AI can help us be more efficient, and that efficiency opens up time that we can reinvest back into what needs to remain human. But we have to be really intentional about that. So when you think about your own institution, because again, I can't answer this for you, but ask yourself, what must remain human? Where do we keep people involved? Where do we want human judgment to be central, even if AI can give it the answers? Where are those relationships the most important at your institution? And that's where you start to make decisions. Efficiency is good, but efficiency is only good when it allows us to meet some of our purposeful goals. I'll tell you another story. I was talking to our faculty development coordinator one day, and I said, oh my gosh, we could use AI to help faculty write better announcements. We can use AI to help faculty with better discussion questions. We can use AI to speed up faculty grading. She looked at me and she said, but do we want to? And I was like, well, of course we want to, and I was all excited. And she said, but what are they doing with that time once we've freed it all up? And I said, well, they're interacting with students. And she's like, are they? How do we know? And she had a really good point for me. Freeing up time does not automatically mean we're using that time for something meaningful. And so her really insightful questions actually pushed us to think about, as we're integrating AI to free this time, we need to simultaneously be doing two different kinds of faculty development programming. One, changing faculty mindset on what it means to be a teacher. It's not just about producing content and grading papers, it's about interacting. And so many of our faculty have spent all their time producing content and grading papers that they didn't even really think about or have the mindset of what to do with that time, particularly online, when we've made it more efficient. So we need to change their mindset. And then number two, we need to actually teach them those instructional pedagogical engagement strategies that we now want them to use with that available time. And so not only did we work on the efficiency, but we focused equally on the what must remain human. Because we want to keep learning and accountability visible. AI is not about just making everything faster, quicker, and look better looking. It's about getting people to engage. It's getting students to learn and getting us to talk to them. And we want to see the judgment. We want to see that engagement. And we want to know that humans are still accountable for all of the work that is produced with that AI integration. Because when we start to have these shared values, we're going to create that spine where we all agree on the learning, the transparency, the integrity. And then now we have a shared agreement that we can start to have our discipline-specific contextual changes. So we agree it must remain human. Now the different courses will decide, what does that look like in their course to remain human? What does it look like in your research to make sure you're remaining accountable to the AI decision making? So we have this one set of shared institutional commitments with the operationalization of what that looks like changing in the different context. Because AI literacy is absolutely not about learning AI. It's about learning how to make good decisions with AI, how to be responsible, how to evaluate it, how to know when to use it, how to know when not to use it, even if you could use it, because the tools themselves will keep changing. And so what becomes really important is that we can understand its capacity, we know about its biases, we can verify the outputs. No matter which AI tool we're using, this remains true. And when we can be responsible users of AI, we build that literacy, that they start to learn the tools, but they also learn how to adapt to the changing tools. And now they can apply it with a shared spine in their disciplinary context to move on to start leading some of these conversations and decisions. Because a lot of us look at it and say, well, I'm just a faculty member. But faculty members are essential for bringing up the unresolved problems, for sharing responsible practices, for talking about what works. And leaders are responsible for taking that information and clarifying what to do with it and figuring out how do we bring together the right people to make those decisions. Because no matter where you are, you can take action. You can think about how you can support AI, how you can look at alignment within your institution, or how you can look at those sustainable practices. And that's whether you're a leader, faculty member, or a support staff member. It might look different in your context, but all of us are looking at support, alignment, and sustainment. So with that said, I just want to end on a note of you thinking about what kind of academic culture you are building. It's not about quickly adopting the AI tools. It's about being intentional and having that shared commitment to what AI use will look like in your institution so you're prepared to grow and evolve with it. With that said, I actually think I went 1 minute over. So, and to respect your time, if you need to leave right now, please do so. I don't want to make you stay up here if you don't have to. There are other presentations, and Jeff just put a link to those in the chat. But I also want to stay online for a few minutes if there's questions or comments or things that I can address for you.
Thanks very much, Gene. And yeah, that's a lot of information in a very short amount of time. So I will be sending out Gene's presentation to all who registered, so you can think about this as you move forward at your institution. But if you do have any questions, feel free to put that into the chat or raise your hand, and I can unmute you. But Gene, I just wanted to say that the term I heard recently was HIL, H-I-L, human in the loop. That's a lot of people are throwing around that term lately because, no matter how you're using AI, it's a human activity. So those prediction machines are out there, but it's all about us people and how we're being intentionally
Absolutely.
using it.
So I've
Wonderful.
had several people comment that I use AI so much, and I do. I use AI all day, every day. They're like, "Aren't you worried about running yourself out of a job?" And I was like, "Actually, absolutely the opposite. The people who are using it and not staying engaged with it may be at risk, but the people who are integrating human in the loop, back and forth collaborative work, they're just being more efficient and getting some of their time back."
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said. Learning is inherently it's a social task. That's what it's been going back to the Socratic method way back when. So for
Yep.
sure. And I also was reminded of when you're asking yourself why we're doing these things, the five whys, that management principle of going back and back, asking yourself why 5 times. Why are we doing this? And some of those questions can be answered.
Yeah, which is especially, I think, important in AI because there are so many cool tools. Like the bells and whistles are so fun that I find myself getting wrapped up in them. And then I'm like, okay, it's not actually solving any of the problems I currently have. They were just cool. And so going back, like you said, and asking yourself, why am I using it again and again?
Terrific. And as we gather for a future series of AI discussions on higher ed, I'm sure that we can also talk about how the cool tools have evolved. Maybe we should just have like one of these
Fun,
episodes or one of these presentations just on stuff that AI
cool
does that's just
tools.
cool.
Yeah, cool tools. Like we're just talk fun today. Yeah.
Very good.
Some
Very
of
good.
those fun tools absolutely solve some people's problems. They just weren't solving my problems. They were just fun for me, but they're probably
Here.
absolutely useful for someone else.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again very much for your time, Gene Van Neck. It's been wonderful having you as a part of this 6-part series. It's been very, very informative, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. And everybody attending and watching this on demand, thank you for being a part of these series, this series of presentations. We appreciate you being here. All right. So
Thank you. Have a
have
great day.
take care. Bye bye.